r/pettyrevenge. Dad gave away my dog for his Airbnb, so I ruined his party house. Dad gave away my dog for his Airbnb, so I ruined his party house. The spare key was still under the fake rock where it had always been, but when I stepped through the front door of my childhood home, everything felt wrong. Too clean. Too sterile. Like a magazine spread instead of the lived-in family house I'd left 3 months ago for my sophomore year. Benny? I called out, dropping my duffel bag and listening for the familiar scramble of claws on hardwood, the excited whimpering that always greeted me. Come here, boy. Silence. I frowned, checking my phone. Dad said he'd be back from his client meeting by 4, and it was barely 3. Maybe he'd taken Benny to the park or something. But as I walked through the living room, I noticed things that made my stomach clench. The worn couch where Benny always slept was gone, replaced by some pristine white sectional that looked like it cost more than my tuition. His food and water bowls weren't in their usual spot by the kitchen island. His favorite rope toy that he'd carried around since he was a puppy, nowhere. I took the stairs 2 at a time to my room, pushing open the door to find it completely transformed. Gone was my queen bed with the navy comforter, my bookshelf crammed with paperbacks, my desk covered in art supplies. Instead, there were 2 twin beds with hotel white linens, generic landscape photos on the walls, and a laminated card on the nightstand that made my blood freeze. Welcome to Thompson Luxury Stays. Wi-Fi password, Paradise 2024. My hands were shaking as I read the house rules printed below. No pets. No smoking. No parties. Quiet hours 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I was still staring at that card when I heard the front door open downstairs. Emma? You home early? Dad's voice carried up the stairs, artificially cheerful in that way that meant he knew he was in deep shit. I made it to the living room before he'd even hung up his keys. He turned around wearing that politician smile he used on difficult clients, already opening his mouth to start whatever bullshit explanation he'd prepared. Where's Benny? The smile faltered. Emma, sweetheart, let me explain. Where is my dog? He sighed, loosening his tie like this conversation was just another business negotiation. Look, I know you're upset, but it was the practical choice. The Airbnb is taking off faster than I ever imagined. We had 3 families cancel last month because of pet allergies, and Benny he was getting old, He wasn't adapting well to the constant stream of strangers. So you gave him away. My voice came out flat, emotionless, which scared me more than if I'd been screaming. I found him a great family. The Johnsons, they live about 20 minutes away, they have kids and a big backyard. You gave away my dog. The words felt like glass in my throat. My dog that I've had since I was 11. That slept in my bed every night until I left for college. You gave him to strangers so you could make more money renting out our house. Dad's jaw tightened. This is still our house, Emma. But it's also a business now. A very successful business that's going to pay for your college and set us up for the future. I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. When had my father become this person? This stranger in an expensive suit who talked about our family home like it was just another investment property. You had no right, I whispered. He was already turning away, dismissing me. You'll understand when you're older. That's when I decided to destroy him. I spent that first night lying in one of the sterile twin beds in what used to be my room, staring at the ceiling and planning. Every few minutes I'd reach over expecting to scratch behind Benny's ears, only to find empty air. The silence was deafening, no gentle snoring, no sleepy sighs, no warm weight pressed against my legs. Around 2 a.m., I heard voices outside. Loud, drunk voices. Bro, this place is sick. Your dad's gonna flip when he sees the reviews. I crept to the window and looked down at the front yard. 4 college guys were stumbling out of an Uber, suitcases in tow, clearly planning to party their way through winter break. One of them was already shotgunning a beer on the front lawn. They had rented my house. Were planning to trash it with their buddies while I lay 15 feet above them, homeless in my own home. That's when the real plan started forming. The next morning, Dad was already gone by the time I came downstairs. There was a note on the kitchen counter, the same granite island where Benny used to rest his chin and beg for scraps. Asterisk Emma, had to show properties all day. There's coffee and bagels. We'll talk more tonight. The guests upstairs are checking out at 11 if you want to avoid them. Dad asterisk. Avoid them. Like I was the inconvenience. I made coffee and opened Dad's laptop, which he'd left conveniently unlocked on the counter. His Airbnb host dashboard was still up, and what I saw made my jaw drop. 3 active listings, my room, the master bedroom, and something called the garden suite, which I realized must be the converted basement. He wasn't just renting out space while he was away. He was running a full-scale hotel operation out of our house while living in, where exactly? I clicked through to his calendar. Booked solid through New Year's. Every single night. At $150 per room. A door slammed upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps and more of that obnoxious laughter. I looked up at the ceiling, my ceiling, and felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. I created my own Airbnb account using my school email. Then I started booking. December 28th through January 2nd, garden suite, reserved for Emma Johnson and 3 guests. Payment method, Dad's own credit card, which I knew by heart from years of ordering textbooks. The same dates, master bedroom, reserved for E. Thompson and 2 guests. By the time I was done, I'd booked every available slot for the week leading up to New Year's using variations of my name and fake guest counts, all charged to Dad's card. Airbnb's system would automatically refund the money to the same card, but not before locking up his entire calendar. But that was just the appetizer. I spent the rest of the morning researching his guests, finding their social media, learning their patterns. The party boys upstairs had helpfully tagged their location in about 15 Instagram stories, including one where they were clearly smoking weed on the back deck and another showing someone doing a keg stand in the kitchen. Screenshots saved. Evidence collected. Then I found Dad's business Instagram, at Thompson Luxury Stays, where he posted aesthetic photos of the house with captions about peaceful retreats and family-friendly accommodations. The comments were full of potential guests asking about availability. I started responding to them. As him. Sorry, we've had some issues with bedbugs lately, but should be resolved soon. Unfortunately dealing with some plumbing problems, sewage backup in the basement suite. Pest control found evidence of mice in the walls, but we're fumigating next week. By noon, his phone was buzzing constantly with cancellation requests. That's when I heard his car in the driveway. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Emma. Dad's voice echoed through the house, beyond furious. Get down here now. I saved my work and closed the laptop, taking my time walking to the living room. He was standing by the kitchen island, phone clutched in one hand, face red with rage. What the hell did you do? He thrust his phone at me, showing a string of cancellation emails. I've got 8 families demanding refunds because someone told them we have bedbugs and sewage problems. I shrugged, settling onto the white sectional that still felt foreign under me. Sounds like a customer service issue. Don't play dumb with me. He started pacing, that vein in his forehead pulsing the way it did when deals went south. This is my business, Emma. My livelihood. Do you have any idea how much money you just cost me? Probably not as much as 8 years of vet bills for Benny would have cost you. He stopped pacing, eyes narrowing. This is about the dog. Seriously. You're going to sabotage everything I've built over a pet. He wasn't a pet. I stood up, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. He was family. But I guess you wouldn't understand that concept anymore. Dad ran his hands through his hair, and for a second he looked less like a businessman and more like the father who used to help me with science projects. But then his phone buzzed again, and the moment vanished. Look, I get that you're upset. But this needs to stop. Right now. He was using his negotiation voice, controlled and reasonable. I worked too hard to let you destroy this because you're having some kind of tantrum. Tantrum? I laughed, short and bitter. Dad, I came home for winter break and discovered my childhood bedroom is being rented to strangers. There's not even a bed for me here anymore. You literally erased me from this house. That's not, he paused, something flickering across his face. You can stay in the basement suite when it's not booked. It's actually really nice down there now. I put in a full bathroom and everything. I stared at him. You want me to hide in the basement of my own house so your guests don't have to know your daughter exists. It's temporary. Just until I can figure out a better arrangement. What arrangement? When exactly did you plan to tell me you turned our home into a hotel? His phone rang before he could answer. I watched his face change as he looked at the caller ID. I have to take this. He stepped away, switching to his professional tone. Mrs. Chen. No, those reviews are completely fabricated. Someone is trying to sabotage my business. While he talked damage control, I pulled out my own phone and checked the fake bookings I'd made that morning. All confirmed. His calendar was completely blocked for New Year's week, traditionally his highest earning period. But then I noticed something that made my stomach flip. A new event had appeared on his shared Google Calendar, one I had access to from when I used to help him organize client meetings. December 31st, 8 p.m., investor party, Thompson Luxury expansion. I clicked on the details. 12 potential investors, including someone from a major hotel chain. The notes mentioned presentations about franchising Thompson Luxury stays, expanding to multiple properties, making it a regional brand. He wasn't just running an Airbnb. He was planning to turn this into an empire. And he was hosting the most important meeting of his business career right here, in our living room, on New Year's Eve. I looked up at Dad, still on the phone, promising Mrs. Chen that his property was definitely bedbug-free. He caught my eye and held up one finger, mouthing, almost done, like this was just a minor hiccup in his day. He had no idea what was coming. Because I just found the perfect target for the grand finale of my revenge. The next few days fell into a twisted routine. Dad would leave early for damage control meetings, while I systematically dismantled his online presence from the comfort of our kitchen island. Every morning brought new cancellations as my fake reviews spread across travel forums and social media. Asterisk stayed here for 3 nights. Mice droppings everywhere and the smell of sewage was unbearable. Host was rude when we complained. Asterisk, Sarah M, 2 stars. Asterisk, beautiful photos but reality is disappointing. Loud construction noise all night and suspicious stains on bedding. Asterisk, Michael K, 1 star. I'd gotten good at varying my writing style, mixing in enough real details about the house to make the reviews seem authentic. The party boys who'd been here opening night had actually left red wine stains on the white sectional, giving me plenty of material to work with. By Thursday, Dad's average rating had dropped from 4.8 stars to 3.2. But the real masterpiece was still to come. I was crafting a particularly devastating review about weird smells and strange noises at night when I heard voices outside. Through the window, I watched Dad talking to a woman in a business suit on our front lawn. She was taking notes and nodding seriously while he gestured at the house. My phone buzzed with a text, asterisk insurance adjuster here for pest inspection. Stay upstairs, asterisk. Insurance fraud. He was actually trying to claim the made-up problems were real so he could file for damages. The desperation was almost funny. But when they came inside, I heard something that made my blood freeze. The thing is, Patricia, Dad was saying, my daughter's been having some issues. Adjustment problems since starting college. I think she might be acting out, trying to get attention. Sabotage within the family can definitely void coverage, the adjuster replied. Do you have documentation of her mental health struggles? I crept to the top of the stairs, phone ready to record. Well, she's been seeing a counselor at school. And there was this incident with our family dog, she became very attached, unhealthily so. When we had to rehome him for the business, she had what I'd call a breakdown. Concerning. Has she made any threats? Not directly, but she's been acting erratic since coming home. I'm worried about what she might do next. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. He was setting me up. Making me sound unstable so when his insurance company investigated the fake reviews and mysterious bookings, he could blame it all on his troubled daughter. The conversation continued downstairs while I sat frozen on the steps. Dad was describing me like I was some kind of dangerous psychopath instead of someone grieving their pet, painting himself as the victim of his unstable child. When they finally left, I didn't even pretend to hide. I was sitting at the kitchen island when Dad walked back in, his face carefully composed. "Hey sweetheart. How was your day?" "Interesting." I didn't look up from the laptop. "Learned a lot about insurance fraud." His smile flickered. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." I finally met his eyes. "Just like you knew exactly what you were doing when you told that woman I was having a mental breakdown." We stared at each other across the granite island where Benny used to beg for scraps. The man looking back at me was a complete stranger. "You started this war, Emma." His voice was quiet, almost sad. "I'm just trying to protect what I've built." "By destroying me?" "By stopping you from destroying yourself." He loosened his tie, suddenly looking exhausted. "This behavior isn't healthy. Maybe we should look into getting you some help." The threat was clear. Keep pushing him, and he'd have me committed. Game over. But Dad had made one crucial mistake. He'd shown me exactly how far he was willing to go to protect his precious business. Which meant I knew exactly how far I needed to go to destroy it. The investor party was in 3 days. Time to get creative. The first complication arrived Friday morning in the form of Mom's ringtone blasting from my phone. I stared at her contact photo, all 3 of us at last year's Christmas, Benny wearing reindeer antlers, and let it go to voicemail. Then immediately felt guilty and called back. "Emma, honey, your father told me about the dog situation." Her voice was carefully neutral, which meant Dad had already spun his version of events. "He's worried about you. He gave away Benny, Mom. Without telling me." A pause. "I know, sweetheart. I know how much that dog meant to you. But your father says you've been acting out. Damaging his business." There it was. Even from 3 states away, Dad's manipulation was working perfectly. My own mother was questioning my sanity instead of his cruelty. "Did he also tell you he turned my bedroom into a hotel room? That I'm supposed to hide in the basement when strangers want to rent our house?" "Emma." Mom's voice got that edge it always had when she was choosing sides, and I already knew which side she'd picked. "Your father is working incredibly hard to secure our financial future. Your college isn't cheap, and this business could pay for graduate school too. So that makes it okay too. What it makes it is complicated. You're 19, honey. You'll understand these decisions better when you're older." The exact same dismissive bullshit Dad had fed me. I hung up and immediately regretted it when she started calling back. But I couldn't deal with being gaslit by both parents while trying to orchestrate the downfall of Dad's empire. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "We'll talk more when you're ready to be reasonable." Reasonable. Right. I was still fuming when I heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I watched Dad stride up the walkway with 2 men in suits. One was carrying a briefcase, the other had a tablet and was already taking photos of the house. They disappeared inside downstairs, and within minutes I could hear Dad's presentation voice echoing from the living room. "Thompson Luxury Stays represents the future of boutique hospitality. We're not just offering accommodations, we're curating experiences." I crept to the top of the stairs and listened to him pitch his expansion plan. The men were potential franchise partners, here to evaluate the flagship property 3 days before the big investor party. This was supposed to be Dad's proof of concept, the perfect house running a flawless operation. "Our average nightly rate is $150, with 95% occupancy year-round," Dad was saying. "Guest satisfaction scores consistently above 4.5 stars." I almost laughed out loud. His current rating was 3.1 and dropping daily. "What about regulatory issues?" one of the men asked. "City permits, zoning compliance. All handled," Dad replied smoothly. "This is a residential property in a family-friendly neighborhood. No restrictions on short-term rentals." That was interesting. And probably a lie. I grabbed my laptop and started researching local housing ordinances while Dad continued his dog and pony show downstairs. It took 20 minutes of digging through city websites, but I finally found what I was looking for. Our neighborhood was zoned R1 residential. Short-term rentals required special permits and neighbor approval within a 300-foot radius. The permit application process took minimum 60 days and included posted notices, community meetings, and safety inspections. Dad had none of those permits. He was operating completely illegally. But even better than the zoning violation was what I found next, a complaint form on the city's code enforcement website. Anonymous reporting encouraged. Investigations typically launched within 48 hours. I was filling out the complaint when I heard the front door close and Dad's voice calling upstairs. "Emma, can you come down here for a minute?" Warning bells went off in my head, but I saved my work and headed downstairs. Dad was standing in the living room with the 2 suits, all 3 wearing identical fake smiles. "Gentlemen, this is my daughter Emma. She's home from college for the holidays." The taller man stepped forward, extending his hand. "Jim Morrison, Regional Development. Your father's told us so much about you." I shook his hand warily, trying to figure out the angle. "Emma's been helping with the business," Dad continued, his smile getting sharper. "Haven't you, sweetheart? She's got great insights into the millennial market." The trap was springing, but I couldn't see the mechanism yet. "Actually," the second man said, consulting his tablet, "we'd love to get your perspective on the guest experience. Mind if we ask a few questions?" "Of course," I replied, because what else could I say with Dad watching my every move? "Have you noticed any issues with noise complaints? Property damage? Guest behavior problems?" Dad's eyes were locked on mine, daring me to sabotage him in front of his potential partners. He thought he had me cornered, either lie for him or look like the unstable daughter he described to Mom and the insurance adjuster. But Dad had forgotten something important about the daughter he'd raised. I'd learned manipulation from the master. "Actually," I said, matching his fake smile with one of my own, "I think the guests have been pretty impressed with how authentic the experience feels. Like they're really staying in someone's actual family home." The men nodded, missing the subtext completely. Dad's done such an amazing job preserving the personal touches. You really feel like you're part of the family when you stay here. Dad's smile faltered slightly as he realized I wasn't going to give him the ammunition he needed to paint me as crazy. That's wonderful to hear, Jim said. Authentic experiences are exactly what today's travelers want. Absolutely, I agreed. In fact, I think Dad's planning something really special for the New Year's Eve party. Right, Dad? Something that'll really show investors what Thompson Luxury Stays is all about. The color drained from his face as he realized I knew about the investor meeting. Should be quite a memorable evening, I continued, still smiling sweetly. I can't wait to see how it all comes together. Dad's phone started ringing before he could respond. He glanced at the screen and his face went even paler. Excuse me, he muttered, stepping away to answer. Yes, this is Thompson. What do you mean code enforcement? I watched understanding dawn in his eyes as he listened to whatever official was calling about my anonymous complaint. His gaze snapped to mine across the room, and for the first time since I'd been home, I saw genuine fear in his expression. The war was escalating. And I was just getting started. Dad's face went through several shades of red during his phone call with code enforcement. I watched him pace by the front windows, his voice dropping to urgent whispers while Jim and his partner exchanged increasingly uncomfortable glances. Is everything all right? Jim asked when Dad finally hung up. Just a routine inquiry, Dad said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Nothing that can't be handled with a simple phone call. The second man, I still hadn't caught his name, was already checking his watch. Perhaps we should reschedule the property tour for another time. No, that's not necessary. Actually, Jim interrupted, we should probably head out anyway. Traffic back to the city, you know. He turned to me with another one of those businessman smiles. Emma, it was lovely meeting you. Your father's very lucky to have such a supportive daughter. If only he knew. After they left, Dad and I stood in the living room staring at each other like gunfighters in an old western. The silence stretched until his phone buzzed with a text. Then another. Then a whole string of them. More cancellations? I asked innocently. He didn't answer, just scrolled through his messages with growing horror. I had a pretty good idea what he was seeing. My fake reviews were getting shared in local Facebook groups now, spreading organically as concerned neighbors warned each other about the problematic Airbnb in their area. You called the city, he said finally. Did I? Emma. His voice was dangerous now. You have no idea what you're messing with. That investor meeting on Tuesday could change everything for this family. For your future. Benny was my future too. But you threw him away like garbage. Dad slammed his phone down on the granite countertop so hard I flinched. Enough. This obsession with that dog is insane. He was an animal, Emma. An animal that was costing me bookings and money. He was the only family member in this house who actually loved me unconditionally. That's ridiculous. Is it? When's the last time you asked how I was doing at school? When's the last time you called just to check in? You know what you asked me about. Whether I need money. That's it. The only relationship you understand anymore is transactional. Something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, or recognition. But it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. I'm trying to build something here, he said quietly. Something that'll take care of all of us. You're trying to build something that matters more to you than all of us. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another Airbnb cancellation, this one for next weekend. Dad's phone lit up simultaneously, and I watched his shoulders sag as he read the same message. They want to know if the bedbug situation has been resolved, I mentioned helpfully. Dad looked at me with something approaching respect, like he was finally seeing me as a real opponent instead of a tantruming child. What's it going to take? What? To end this. What do you want? The question hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to say, Benny back, but we both knew that ship had sailed. The Johnsons probably loved him by now. He probably loved them back, the way dogs do. I want my room back, I said finally. I want this to be a home again, not a hotel. Dad shook his head slowly. Emma, I've got contracts. Bookings through March. I can't just. Then we have a problem. His phone rang again. This time the caller ID made him actually groan out loud, city code enforcement. As he answered, I headed upstairs to continue my research. Because Dad had asked what it would take to end this, but he'd forgotten something crucial. This wasn't about negotiation anymore. This was about proving that some things in life were more important than profit margins. And if he couldn't learn that lesson the easy way, I'd have to teach it to him the hard way. The investor party was in 4 days. Time to make sure it would be absolutely unforgettable. The weekend brought a development I hadn't expected, allies. Saturday morning, I was researching the investor guest list when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door holding a casserole dish and looking determined. Emma, honey. She pulled me into a hug the moment I opened the door. I heard you were home. And I heard about poor Benny. My throat tightened. Mrs. Patterson had always slipped Benny treats over the fence, calling him her honorary grand dog since her kids lived across the country. I can't believe your father did that without telling you, she continued, pushing past me into the kitchen. That sweet boy lived here his whole life. I followed her, watching as she set down what smelled like her famous tuna casserole. Dad says he found him a good family. Oh, I'm sure he did. The Johnsons seem lovely. She paused, giving me a meaningful look. I may have driven by their house a few times. Benny's got a beautiful yard now, lots of room to run. Relief flooded through me. At least he was actually okay. But that doesn't make what your father did right, Mrs. Patterson continued, lowering her voice conspirationally. And between you and me, this whole Airbnb nonsense has been a nightmare for the neighborhood. What do you mean? She pulled out her phone, showing me photos of our front yard littered with beer cans. Last weekend's guests. And the week before, someone's car was blocking the Hendersons' driveway at 2 a.m. Music until dawn, people smoking on your back deck where my grandkids can see. I studied the photos, my mind racing. Did you report any of this? Honey, I've been documenting everything. Her smile turned sharp. Your father thinks he's running some luxury operation, but what he's really doing is operating an illegal party house in a residential zone. This was better than I'd hoped. Would you be willing to share some of that documentation? With code enforcement. Already did. But if you need copies for anything else. She winked. After she left, I spent the afternoon organizing Mrs. Patterson's evidence with my own research. Text messages from other neighbors complaining about noise. Photos of property damage. Documentation that Dad had been advertising relaxed house rules and party-friendly atmosphere to attract younger guests. But the real goldmine was what Mrs. Patterson had overheard from her husband, who worked for the city planning department. Dad's permit application had been submitted just 3 days ago, 2 months after he'd started operating. Even if approved, it wouldn't grandfather in his existing violations. I was compiling everything into a comprehensive complaint file when I heard voices outside again. This time it was Dad with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 40s wearing yoga pants and an expression that screamed, angry parent. Mr. Thompson, I don't think you understand the severity of this situation, she was saying as they approached the front door. They came inside while I stayed hidden at the top of the stairs. Mrs. Caldwell, I assure you this was an isolated incident. Isolated? My 16-year-old daughter came home from your guests' small gathering, completely drunk. They bought alcohol for minors. My stomach dropped. Dad's guests had been supplying alcohol to high school kids. I had no knowledge of any party, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. My listing clearly states no parties. Your guests posted videos on Instagram, Mr. Thompson. Videos of my daughter and her friends drinking in your backyard. If I report this to police, you'll be facing criminal charges. I pulled out my phone and started searching Instagram hashtags for our address. Within minutes, I found the videos Mrs. Caldwell mentioned, teenagers drinking beer and playing music on our back deck while Dad's guests cheered them on. Screenshots saved. Evidence collected. What do you want? Dad asked quietly. I want this operation shut down before someone gets seriously hurt. And if it's not, I'll be filing complaints with every agency I can think of, police, code enforcement, the state liquor board. After she left, Dad sank onto the white sectional with his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Rough day? I asked, coming downstairs. He looked up, and I was shocked by how exhausted he looked. Emma, I think, maybe we should talk. But before he could continue, both our phones buzzed simultaneously with the same notification. Another cancellation. This one for New Year's Eve week. The same week as his investor party. Dad's face went pale as he calculated the lost revenue. They can't all cancel. The party's Tuesday. Maybe that's the universe telling you something, I suggested. He stood up abruptly, businessman mask sliding back into place. No. I've worked too hard for this. Tuesday is happening exactly as planned. I watched him storm off to his office, probably to start damage control calls. But he'd made another crucial mistake. He just confirmed that nothing, not neighbor complaints, not criminal liability, not his own daughter's pain, would make him reconsider his priorities. Which meant I was fully justified in what I was about to do to his precious investor party. The gloves were officially off. Sunday morning brought a text that made my blood run cold, asterisk coming home early to prep for Tuesday. Need you to stay somewhere else Monday through Wednesday. We'll pay for hotel. Dad asterisk. He was trying to exile me from my own house during the most important week of his business expansion. The audacity was breathtaking. I was still staring at the message when another text arrived, this one from an unknown number, asterisk hey Emma, this is Jake Patterson, Mrs. P's grandson. She gave me your number. Heard you might need help with a project winking face asterisk. Mrs. Patterson had been busy. I texted back asking what kind of help he had in mind. Asterisk software engineering major. Also DJ on weekends. Grandma says your dad's having some kind of fancy party Tuesday. Might be fun to crash, asterisk. An idea started forming. A beautifully chaotic idea. Can you handle sound systems? Asterisk in my sleep. What did you have in mind, asterisk? I called him instead of texting back. Jake turned out to be a junior at the community college with a mischievous laugh and what sounded like serious technical skills. More importantly, he was as angry about Benny as his grandmother was. That dog used to come to all our backyard barbecues, he said. My little cousin learned to walk holding on to his collar. What your dad did was messed up. We spent an hour planning what Jake called Operation Party Crasher. The beauty was in its simplicity. Jake would arrive Tuesday afternoon posing as the AV tech Dad had hired for the investor presentation. Once he was inside and connected to the sound system, we'd have complete control over the evening's audio. But Jake had an even better idea. My girlfriend works for a catering company. She could probably get us intel on the food service, maybe even get someone inside. The plan was growing legs. And tentacles. Monday arrived with Dad in full preparation mode, barking orders at various service contractors while I pretended to pack for my forced hotel exile. He booked me a room at a Holiday Inn 20 minutes away, close enough that I couldn't claim he'd abandoned me, far enough that I couldn't interfere with his big night. What he didn't know was that I had no intention of going to any hotel. The house needs to be perfect tomorrow, he told me as I loaded a suitcase into my car. This could determine our entire future. I'm sure it will, I replied truthfully. I drove to the Holiday Inn and checked in, establishing my alibi. Then I drove back and parked 3 blocks away, sneaking through the Hendersons' backyard to reach our house from behind. The spare key Mrs. Patterson had given me years ago for dog sitting still worked on the back door. From my hiding spot in the basement garden suite, I could hear Dad above, obsessing over every detail. The investor presentation was scheduled for 8 p.m., with cocktails starting at 7. 12 potential partners, including the hotel chain executive who could greenlight Dad's franchise dreams. My phone buzzed with updates from Jake. His girlfriend Sarah had confirmed she'd be working the catering crew. Jake himself had already called Dad's office, posing as the AV company to confirm technical requirements for tomorrow. Everything was falling into place. But then I heard something that made my stomach flip. Dad was on the phone with someone, his voice carrying clearly through the heating vents. Yes, I understand the policy about family members. No, she won't be present during the meeting. She's staying elsewhere through Wednesday. Absolutely. This is a professional presentation, not a family gathering. He wasn't just hiding me from the investors. He'd actively promised them I wouldn't be there. Which meant my presence tomorrow night wouldn't just be embarrassing, it would be a direct violation of whatever agreement he'd made. Perfect. I settled into wait, mentally rehearsing my role in tomorrow's performance. Dad thought he'd eliminated all the variables, controlled every possible disruption. He was about to learn that the biggest variable in any equation was the one you never saw coming. And I was going to be spectacular. Tuesday morning arrived with the sound of catering trucks and florists turning our house into Dad's vision of corporate perfection. From my basement hideout, I listened to him orchestrate the transformation like a general preparing for battle. The presentation screen goes there, bars set up in the corner, and I want those flower arrangements moved 3 inches to the left, his voice carried through the vents as he directed the small army of contractors. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, *AV truck arrives at 2 p.m. Sarah's with the catering crew now, says your dad is stressed AF, *. Another message came from Mrs. Patterson, * saw the commotion. Half the neighborhood is talking. Mrs. Chen thinks your father's running some kind of money laundering operation, face with tears of joy, *. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dad's attempts at projecting success were making him look more suspicious to the people who actually knew him. I was scrolling through the final RSVPs for tonight's event when I heard unfamiliar voices upstairs. Heavy footsteps, official-sounding conversation. My blood went cold. Mr. Thompson, we're here for the compliance inspection you requested. Dad's voice, tight with confusion, I'm sorry, what inspection? Code enforcement follow-up. We have you down for a voluntary safety inspection before tonight's business gathering. Something about resolving the complaints. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't arranged any inspection. This was either incredibly bad timing or... Sir, we also have reports of unpermitted commercial use of this residential property. We'll need to document the current setup before you host any business functions. Oh. Oh no. This wasn't my doing. Someone else had escalated the complaints, probably Mrs. Caldwell or one of the other angry neighbors. The timing couldn't be worse, or better, depending on your perspective. I crept to the basement stairs, listening to Dad's increasingly frantic explanations. Gentlemen, there must be some mistake. This is a private dinner party, not a commercial event. I have investors flying in from 3 states for this meeting. According to our records, you're operating multiple short-term rental units without proper permits. Tonight's gathering appears to be a business function related to that operation. A long pause. Then Dad, in his most persuasive voice, what would it take to postpone this inspection until tomorrow? I could make it worth your while to be flexible on the timing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sir, are you attempting to bribe a city official? No. No, absolutely not. I just meant, perhaps a donation to the city's parks fund, or... Mr. Thompson, I'm going to stop you right there. This was spiraling beyond anything I'd planned. Dad wasn't just risking his business anymore, he was risking criminal charges. Part of me wanted to run upstairs and somehow defuse the situation, but I was trapped. If the inspectors found me here after Dad had specifically promised I'd be elsewhere, it would confirm he was lying about everything else too. My phone buzzed, Jake, texting that he was pulling up outside. Situation foobar, I texted back. City inspectors here. Abort, *. Hell no. This makes it even better. I'm the AV tech, remember? They'll expect me, *. Jake was right. The more chaos, the easier it would be to blend in and position ourselves for tonight. But as I listened to Dad dig himself deeper into a hole with increasingly desperate explanations, I realized something that made my stomach churn. I was about to destroy a man who was already destroying himself. The question was whether I could live with being the one to push him over the edge. The inspection continued for 2 excruciating hours. I heard the city officials documenting every violation, unpermitted commercial use, inadequate fire exits for business gatherings, missing occupancy permits. Each infraction was another nail in Dad's coffin, and I hadn't even started my revenge yet. Through the heating vents, I could hear Dad's voice getting higher and more strained as he tried to explain away the obvious signs of his illegal operation. Guest registration tablets on the kitchen counter. Commercial-grade linen stacked in closets. A laminated price sheet taped inside a drawer that he'd forgotten to hide. My phone vibrated with updates from Jake, who had apparently waltzed right past the chaos and was now setting up his equipment upstairs. * Your dad is sweating. Inspectors found the guest logbook. Also, whoever designed your sound system was an amateur. I can do some real damage with this setup, *. Another text from Sarah, * catering crew got question 2. City wants to know if this is a restaurant operation. Your dad almost cried when they asked about commercial kitchen permits, *. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then I heard one of the inspectors ask, what about family members? Do any relatives live on the property? My daughter's away at college, Dad replied quickly. She only visits occasionally. But her room is listed as a rental unit. A pause that stretched so long I thought my phone might have died. It's flexible space. Multi-purpose. The inspector's response was dry. I see. And where does she sleep when she visits? Another pause. We have arrangements. I closed my eyes, listening to my father explain to strangers why his daughter didn't have a bedroom in her own home. The casual cruelty of it hit me all over again. He'd been practicing this lie, perfecting it for situations exactly like this. By 4 p.m., the inspectors finally left with a promise to deliver their report by week's end. I heard Dad immediately get on the phone with what sounded like a lawyer, his voice echoing with barely controlled panic. Richard, I need damage control. The city's threatening to shut me down before tonight's presentation. No, I can't postpone. These investors are flying in from Chicago and Atlanta. What do you mean criminal exposure? While he spiraled upstairs, I got a text that made everything worse. * Emma, heard about the inspection from Mrs. P. Your father called me crying. Maybe you should come home and talk to him. Mom asterisk. Mom. Perfect timing. Another text immediately followed, asterisk I'm driving down. We'll be there by 6. This has gone far enough, asterisk. My chest tightened. Mom's involvement changed everything. She had a way of making me feel guilty about things that weren't even my fault, and if she showed up tonight playing peacemaker, it would completely derail my plans. But then I heard Dad upstairs, apparently talking to someone new. Mr. Harrison, I understand your concerns about the inspection, but I assure you it was just a routine check. No, there won't be any issues tonight. Yes, absolutely, we're fully compliant with all local ordinances. He was lying. To the investors. Even after getting caught red-handed by the city, he was still planning to go through with the presentation and pretend everything was fine. My phone buzzed with another message from Jake, asterisk sound check complete. We'll live in T-3 hours. You sure you want to do this? Your dad looks like he's about to have a heart attack, asterisk. I stared at the message, finger hovering over the keyboard. The responsible thing would be to call this off. Dad was clearly in over his head, Mom was coming to mediate, and the city inspection had already damaged him more than anything I could do. But then I heard his voice again, smooth and confident as he lied to another investor about tonight's celebration of Thompson Luxury's expansion into new markets. He was still choosing his business over everything else. Still putting profit before family, success before honesty. Game on, I texted back. Let's give these investors a presentation they'll never forget. The war was about to reach its final act. By 6 p.m., the house had been transformed into Dad's version of corporate paradise. Through the basement window, I watched valets setting up in our driveway while catering staff arranged champagne stations in what used to be our family room. The whole scene looked like something from a luxury hotel brochure. My phone lit up with a call from Mom. I let it ring, then immediately got a text, asterisk I'm 20 minutes out. We're going to fix this mess before it gets worse, asterisk. Fix it. Like I was some broken thing that needed repair instead of a daughter who'd been betrayed by her own father. Jake's voice crackled through my earpiece, we'd switched to a more secure communication system. First guests arriving. Your dad's putting on the performance of his life, but he keeps checking his phone like he's expecting bad news. He's waiting for Mom, I whispered back. She's coming to shut this down. Want me to delay her somehow? Before I could answer, I heard car doors slamming outside. But it wasn't Mom's sedan pulling up, it was a black town car, and 3 people in expensive suits were climbing out. The Chicago investors, I breathed, recognizing one from his LinkedIn photo. They're early. Dad's voice boomed through the house as he welcomed them, every syllable dripping with fake confidence. Gentlemen. Welcome to Thompson Luxury Stays headquarters. I think you're going to love what we've built here. I crept up the basement stairs, positioning myself where I could see into the living room through a crack in the door. Dad was giving them the full tour, gesturing expansively at the curated design elements and premium guest experience features that used to be our family photos and comfortable furniture. The numbers speak for themselves, he was saying, pulling up charts on his tablet. Occupancy rates consistently above 90%, with guest satisfaction scores that outperform major hotel chains. One of the investors, a stern woman with silver hair, was taking notes. What about regulatory compliance? We've heard there have been some municipal inquiries. Dad's smile never wavered. Just routine paperwork. Growing pains when you're pioneering a new market segment. Everything's been resolved. My stomach clenched. Even now, even after this afternoon's disaster, he was still lying. More cars were arriving. I counted at least 8 people now, all clutching cocktails and business cards while Dad painted his picture of Thompson Luxury's inevitable success. The energy in the room was electric with possibility and greed. That's when I heard the sound that made my blood freeze, Mom's car turning into the driveway. Jake, I whispered into my earpiece. We have a problem. The cavalry's arriving. More like the nuclear option. Mom's here, and she's going to try to shut everything down before we can execute. Through the window, I watched Mom climb out of her car, surveying the valet situation and catering setup with obvious dismay. She looked like a woman preparing for battle. New plan, Jake said. Sarah's going to accidentally spill something on your mom, delay her in the kitchen while she gets cleaned up. Buys us maybe 10 minutes. That won't be enough. Once she gets in there and starts talking to Dad, game over. She'll make him cancel everything. Then we move now. The presentation doesn't start for another hour, but most of the investors are here. I can trigger the sound system anytime. I watched Mom stride toward the front door, her expression the same one she'd worn when she caught me cheating on a math test in 7th grade. Disappointed but determined to fix whatever mess I'd created. Except this time, I wasn't backing down. Do it, I told Jake. Start the show. Because Mom might be able to guilt me into submission, but she couldn't undo what was about to happen to Dad's precious investors. The final act was beginning, whether she liked it or not. My finger was still hovering over my phone, ready to give Jake the signal, when I heard Mom's voice cut through the investor chatter like a knife. Robert? What the hell is going on here? Dad's smooth presentation voice faltered. Honey. You're early. Let me just finish introducing you two. These are the investors. Mom's voice carried that special tone that meant someone was about to get destroyed. The ones you told me were coming for a casual dinner. Through my crack in the door, I could see the Chicago group exchanging glances. The silver-haired woman was already putting away her notebook. Margaret, perhaps we should discuss this privately, Dad started. Oh, I think we're way past private discussions. Mom's heels clicked across the hardwood as she surveyed the champagne stations and presentation screens. Emma called me yesterday. Told me about Benny. About her room. My heart stopped. I hadn't called Mom yesterday. Hadn't talked to her since our fight about being reasonable. Dad's face went white. Emma's not even here. She's staying at a hotel while we handle business. Is she? Mom pulled out her phone, and I realized with growing horror what was happening. Because her location services say she's in this house. Have been all day. The Find My iPhone app. The family tracking we'd set up years ago for safety that I'd completely forgotten about. That's impossible, Dad said, but his voice cracked slightly. One of the investors, a younger guy in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give you folks some privacy to sort this out. No. Dad's desperation was showing now. This is just a minor family miscommunication. Nothing that affects our business proposal. But Mom was already heading for the basement door. Emma. I know you're down there. My mind raced through options. I could hide, but she'd find me eventually. I could run, but Jake and Sarah were already in position. Or. Jake, I whispered into my earpiece. Emergency change of plans. My mom's about to blow everything up. We need to move now, before she gets to me. Roger that. Initiating chaos protocol. The first thing that happened was the lights. Every bulb in the house started flashing in sequence, living room, kitchen, dining room, like some kind of disco fever dream. The investors looked around in confusion as the carefully curated ambience turned into a rave. Then the sound system kicked in. Instead of Jake's planned audio sabotage, what blasted through every speaker in the house was a recording I'd made earlier that week. Dad's own voice, crystal clear and undeniably authentic. The thing is, Patricia, my daughter's been having some issues. Adjustment problems since starting college. I think she might be acting out, trying to get attention. The insurance adjuster's response followed. Sabotage within the family can definitely void coverage. And Dad again, well, she's been seeing a counselor at school. And there was this incident with our family dog. She became very attached, unhealthily so. When we had to rehome him for the business, she had what I'd call a breakdown. The living room went dead silent except for my father's recorded voice describing me as mentally unstable. Every investor was staring at Dad, whose face had gone from white to green. You recorded me, he whispered, his voice barely audible over his own words still echoing from the speakers. Emma Margaret Thompson. Mom's voice carried up from the basement. Get up here right now. But before I could move, the front door burst open and Mrs. Patterson walked in like she owned the place, followed by what looked like half the neighborhood. Sorry to interrupt, she announced cheerfully, but we have a few things to discuss about this illegal hotel operation. Starting with the underage drinking, the noise violations, and the fact that none of you seem to have proper permits. The silver-haired investor was already putting on her coat. Mr. Thompson, I think it's clear this isn't the right time for business discussions. Dad looked around the room, at his fleeing investors, at the neighbors filing in with cameras and documentation, at Mom standing halfway down the basement stairs with her hands on her hips, at the speakers still broadcasting his character assassination of his own daughter. For the first time since I'd been home, he looked completely, utterly defeated. And I realized that somewhere in the chaos of my perfect revenge, I'd forgotten to feel satisfied about it. The chaos in the living room was beautiful and terrible and absolutely nothing like I'd imagined it would be. Jake's light show was still strobing across the walls while my recorded conversation with the insurance adjuster played on loop, and investors were practically trampling each other to get to the door. But Dad wasn't looking at his fleeing business partners or the neighbors flooding in with their phones out. He was staring directly at me through the basement doorway, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even the defeated exhaustion I'd expected. It was disappointment. Pure, crushing disappointment, like I'd become someone he didn't recognize. Turn it off, he said quietly, his voice somehow carrying over all the noise. Jake, kill the sound, I whispered into my earpiece. The house went silent except for the murmur of neighbors comparing notes and the click of Mom's heels as she climbed back up from the basement. Well, Mrs. Patterson said brightly, surveying the wreckage, I think this went rather well. The silver-haired investor paused at the front door, turning back to Dad with something that might have been pity. Mr. Thompson, I've been in business for 30 years. I've seen partnerships fail, deals fall apart, markets collapse. But I've never seen someone destroy themselves so thoroughly over. She gestured at the chaos around us. Over whatever this is. Dad's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Ms. Chen, if you could just give me 5 minutes to explain. There's nothing to explain. Good luck to you. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. One by one, the other investors followed, murmuring apologies and excuses that fooled no one. Within 10 minutes, Dad's empire expansion meeting had become a living room full of angry neighbors and family members. Robert, Mom said, her voice deadly calm, we need to talk. Privately. But before Dad could respond, my phone started ringing. Unknown number, but something about it made my blood run cold. Emma. An unfamiliar woman's voice, shaky with emotion. This is Janet Johnson. We have Benny. The entire room seemed to stop spinning. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, suddenly unable to breathe properly. Is he okay? I managed. That's why I'm calling. He's not eating much. Won't play with our kids. Our vet thinks he's depressed, maybe grieving. Her voice cracked. We've tried everything, but he just sits by our front window all day like he's waiting for someone. The recording device in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. All around me, neighbors were still documenting Dad's violations, Mom was building up to what looked like the fight of the century, and Jake was probably wondering why I'd gone completely silent. But all I could think about was Benny, sitting in a strange house, waiting for someone who was never coming home. Mrs. Johnson, I said carefully, what exactly are you asking? Could you maybe visit him? We live about 20 minutes away. I know it's complicated with your father and the business arrangement, but Benny clearly misses you terribly. Behind me, I heard Dad's voice, strained and desperate. Margaret, you have to understand, tonight was everything. 2 years of work, gone because Emma decided to. Because Emma what? Mom's voice was rising now. Because she was upset that you gave away her dog and turned her bedroom into a hotel room. Because she's 19 years old and acting like a 19-year-old whose father betrayed her. The fight I'd been waiting for was finally starting, the reckoning that would determine whether our family could survive what Dad had done to it. But suddenly, the only thing that mattered was a golden retriever sitting in someone else's house, heartbroken and waiting. Mrs. Johnson, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up with Mrs. Johnson and turned to find the entire room staring at me. Mom looked like she was ready to ground me until I graduated college, Dad appeared to be having some kind of breakdown, and the neighbors were still documenting evidence like crime scene investigators. Where are you going? Mom demanded as I grabbed my keys from the counter. To see Benny. The words came out sharper than I intended. The dog Dad threw away is apparently depressed and won't eat. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. Emma, we need to talk about what just happened here. What happened here is exactly what you deserved. I turned to face him fully, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. You prioritized money over family. You lied to investors, to the city, to Mom, to me. You called me mentally unstable to cover your own illegal business practices. That recording was taken out of context. Was it? Because it sounded like you describing your daughter as a problem to be managed instead of a person to be loved. Mom stepped between us, her mediator instincts kicking in despite everything. Both of you need to stop. Emma, you can't just. But her words were cut off by a new voice from the doorway. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson. We all turned to see a woman in a business suit holding an official-looking folder. Behind her stood two uniformed officers. I'm Detective Morrison, City Fraud Investigation Unit. We need to discuss some discrepancies in your business license applications. The color drained from Dad's face. I don't understand. We have reports that you've been operating commercial lodging without permits, potentially evading taxes on rental income, and there are allegations of bribery involving city officials. My stomach dropped. The bribery thing was from this afternoon's inspection disaster, but fraud investigation. That was way beyond anything I'd intended. Detective Morrison's eyes swept the room, taking in the scattered presentation materials and lingering neighbors. Is this the business gathering you declared as a private family dinner on your permit application? Dad opened his mouth, then closed it, apparently realizing that every possible answer would incriminate him further. Mr. Thompson, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning. Are you arresting him? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Not at this time. But we do need to discuss some serious irregularities in his financial filings. As they talked logistics, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake, *, holy shit, Emma. Police scanner is going crazy. Something about tax evasion charges, *. Tax evasion. The words hit me like ice water. I'd wanted to embarrass Dad, cost him some bookings, maybe force him to reconsider his priorities. I hadn't wanted to destroy his life or potentially send him to prison. But as I watched him gather his coat with shaking hands, trying to maintain his dignity while neighbors whispered and took pictures, I realized something that made my chest tight with panic. I'd started a war I no longer knew how to control. And while Dad was facing the consequences of his choices, somewhere across town, Benny was still sitting by a window waiting for someone to bring him home. I have to go, I said to no one in particular, pushing past the officers and investigators crowding our living room. Emma, wait, Mom called after me. But I was already out the door, running for my car while sirens wailed in the distance and my childhood home transformed into a crime scene behind me. The war was over. I just wasn't sure anyone had actually won. The Johnson house was a modest ranch with a big fenced yard, exactly the kind of place Dad always said we couldn't afford. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching through their front window as a golden shape pressed against the glass. When Mrs. Johnson opened the door, Benny's reaction nearly broke me. He went completely still for a heartbeat, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then he launched himself at me with the kind of desperate joy that only dogs can manage, whimpering and spinning in circles and trying to lick every inch of my face at once. Oh my God, Mrs. Johnson breathed. I've never seen him move that fast. I buried my face in Benny's fur, breathing in that familiar smell of dog shampoo and sunshine that meant home in a way our house hadn't for months. He was thinner than I remembered, his ribs more prominent under my hands. He hasn't been eating much, Mrs. Johnson explained, leading us into their living room. The vet says he's physically fine, just sad. We sat on their couch while Benny pressed against me like he was trying to become part of my body. Mrs. Johnson's kids, twin girls around 10, watched from the doorway with expressions of pure fascination. Mom, one of them whispered, why is he so happy? Because sometimes, Mrs. Johnson said gently, love is stronger than everything else. I stayed for 2 hours, playing fetch in their backyard and watching Benny transform back into the happy dog I remembered. When it was time to leave, he followed me to my car and sat down firmly beside the driver's door, tail wagging expectantly. I can't take you yet, buddy, I whispered, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. But I'm working on it, okay? I promise. The drive home felt like traveling between two different worlds. When I pulled into our driveway, the police cars were gone but Mom's sedan was still there, along with Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda and several other neighbors' vehicles. Inside, I found an emergency neighborhood meeting happening in our living room. Mom was sitting in Dad's usual chair looking exhausted, while Mrs. Patterson held court with a legal pad covered in notes. Emma. Mom stood up when she saw me. How's Benny? Heartbroken but alive. I looked around the room. Where's Dad? Still at the police station. His lawyer thinks they'll release him tonight, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. Emma, dear, we've been discussing the situation. The city's shutting down the Airbnb operation immediately, and there's talk of substantial fines. How substantial? Enough to probably force a sale of the house, Mom said quietly. Your father mortgaged everything to fund this expansion plan. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd wanted to humble Dad, not destroy our family's entire future. But, Mrs. Patterson continued with a sly smile, there might be another option. Several of us have been talking, and we have a proposition. She explained their plan while I sat in stunned silence. The neighbors were willing to form an investment group, not for Dad's hotel empire, but to help us buy out his debts in exchange for turning our house back into an actual home. Mrs. Patterson's son was a real estate attorney who could structure the deal. The Hendersons knew a contractor who could restore my bedroom. The condition, Mrs. Patterson said firmly, is that your father gets help. Real help. And the Airbnb operation ends permanently. Mom was already crying. You do that? After everything Robert put you all through? Honey, Mrs. Patterson said gently, we're not doing it for Robert. We're doing it for you and Emma. And for Benny, who deserves to come home. That's when I heard Dad's key in the front door. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in one evening, shoulders slumped, tie askew, the confidence that had defined him completely shattered. When he saw the room full of neighbors, he stopped short. I suppose you're here to gloat, he said quietly. Actually, Mrs. Patterson replied, we're here to help. If you're ready to accept it. What happened next took 3 hours of difficult conversation, some tears from all of us, and a promise from Dad to attend counseling and give up his expansion dreams. But by midnight, we had the framework of a deal that would save our house and bring our family back together. The last thing I did before going to bed was text Mrs. Johnson, *, can I pick up Benny tomorrow? He's coming home, *. Her response came immediately, *, he's been sitting by the window since you left. We'll have him ready, *. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's building something better from the ashes. Dad lost his empire, but we found our family again. And that felt like the only victory that really mattered.